Could we actually be witnessing the unthinkable? Bitter Original Six rivals Montreal and Boston completing a blockbuster trade that reshapes both rosters? The proposed deal sending Pavel Zacha to the Canadiens in exchange for Arber Xhekaj and Oliver Kapanen has hockey fans buzzing. But the real question is whether these historic adversaries could ever actually pull the trigger on such a significant transaction. Let's start with some crucial historical context, because the relationship between the Montreal Canadiens and Boston Bruins goes far beyond typical NHL rivalry. We're talking about decades of bad blood, playoff battles, and a mutual distrust that runs so deep that trades between these organizations are virtually non-existent. The last real player-for-player transaction between Montreal and Boston happened way back in 2001, which tells you everything about how these teams view each other. This past offseason, they did manage a draft pick swap, but that's basically the bare minimum of collaboration possible in professional hockey. Actually trading roster players or significant prospects between these franchises requires overcoming years of institutional reluctance and competitive animosity, which makes this proposed three-player deal all the more fascinating to analyze. Caleb Kearney of Heavy Sports crafted this proposal with Montreal's needs clearly in mind. The Canadiens have been desperately searching for that elusive second-line center, someone who can provide consistent offensive production and complement Nick Suzuki down the middle. Pavel Zacha theoretically fits that profile perfectly, a 28-year-old veteran who posted 47 points in 82 games last season with Boston. From a physical standpoint, Zacha brings exactly what Montreal covets. At 6'3" and 208 pounds, he's got the size to compete in the tough Atlantic Division, combined with enough skill to quarterback offensive sequences and contribute in all situations. He was originally selected 6th overall by New Jersey back in 2015, so the pedigree is there, even if his career hasn't quite reached the superstar trajectory many expected. The financial component makes this trade even more intriguing from Montreal's perspective. Zacha has 2 years remaining on his 4-year, $19 million extension signed with Boston in 2023. That works out to about $4.75 million per season, which represents reasonable value for a proven second-line center in today's salary cap environment. The Canadiens have the cap flexibility to absorb that contract without compromising their other roster priorities. But here's where this proposal becomes incredibly controversial from a Montreal fan perspective: the asking price. Trading Arber Xhekaj and Oliver Kapanen for 2 years of Pavel Zacha will be an absolutely massive overpayment that could haunt this organization for years to come. Let's talk about what Montreal would be giving up. Xhekaj, affectionately known as the Sheriff, has become a legitimate fan favorite in Montreal. The 24-year-old undrafted defenseman brings physical intimidation, defensive reliability, and genuine toughness that's increasingly rare in modern hockey. At 6'4" and 240 pounds, he's exactly the kind of player championship teams need in playoff battles. His 118 penalty minutes last season demonstrate his willingness to stand up for teammates and control the physical tone of games. Beyond the on-ice contributions, Xhekaj represents something intangible but incredibly valuable: passion, identity, and connection with the fan base. Montreal supporters love players who embrace the pressure and intensity of playing in that market, and Xhekaj embodies those qualities completely. Trading him would create massive backlash from a fan base already frustrated by years of rebuilding. Then there's Oliver Kapanen, a prospect who represents significant future value for the organization. Including him in this package alongside Xhekaj would essentially mean trading away both present toughness and future offensive potential for a rental-type acquisition that may not even move the championship timeline needle significantly. From Boston's perspective, this trade makes considerably more sense. They'd be acquiring a young, physical defenseman under team control at minimal salary, plus a promising prospect, in exchange for a veteran forward they may not view as essential to their long-term plans. If the Bruins are concerned about their championship window closing, accumulating younger assets like Xhekaj and Kapanen can help extend their competitive timeline. However, here's the critical detail that might kill this entire proposal before it ever gets serious consideration. According to Jimmy Murphy's reporting for RG Media, the Bruins simply aren't interested in moving Zacha right now. Despite Montreal's apparent interest, Boston's management doesn't see a compelling reason to trade a productive veteran who fits their current roster construction. Murphy's source suggests that the Bruins' performance during the first few months of the 2025-26 season will ultimately determine Zacha's future, along with several other veteran roster players, which makes perfect sense from Boston's strategic perspective. Why make major roster moves now when you can wait and evaluate whether this team is genuinely competitive or whether a more significant retool becomes necessary? The Bruins find themselves at a fascinating crossroads after last season's disappointing performance. Was that campaign just an aberration, a temporary setback for a still competitive roster? Or was it the beginning of a more significant decline that requires aggressive roster changes? Management doesn't have clear answers to these questions yet, which explains their reluctance to move established players like Zacha. The timing consideration adds another layer of complexity to these trade discussions. If Montreal is genuinely targeting Zacha, they might need to wait until Boston's season unfolds and the organization makes definitive decisions about their competitive trajectory. That could mean waiting until the trade deadline, when pricing and availability might look completely different than they do now. There's also the psychological barrier of making trades with your most hated rival to consider. Both organizations understand that any player they trade to the other side could potentially come back to haunt them in crucial divisional matchups or playoff series. That fear of strengthening your biggest competitor while simultaneously weakening your own roster creates natural resistance to completing these transactions. The proposed trade also raises questions about Montreal's overall strategy and timeline. Are the Canadiens truly ready to sacrifice young assets and future potential for immediate roster upgrades? Their recent emphasis on patient development and building through the draft suggests they might not be willing to make these kinds of win-now moves quite yet. For Montreal fans dreaming of landing that elusive second-line center, Zacha might seem appealing on paper, but the cost would be absolutely crushing. Trading Chicago alone would be difficult to justify. Including Kapanen makes this proposal completely untenable from Montreal's perspective. The reality is that trades between Montreal and Boston remain incredibly rare for good reasons. The competitive dynamics, historical animosity, and fear of strengthening your greatest rival all combine to make these transactions nearly impossible to execute. Unless one team is absolutely desperate or sees a can't-miss opportunity, these rivals will continue conducting their business with the other 29 NHL franchises instead. What do you think about this proposed trade? Would you sacrifice both Chicago and Kapanen for 2 years of Pavel Zacha, or would that represent an unacceptable overpayment for Montreal? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit that like button if you believe some rivalries are too intense for trading partners to ever truly trust each other.